Ethan didn't like change. He lived in a small apartment in Capitol Hill, Seattle, where autumn sunlight streamed through an old window frame. And every morning began with an Americano from the corner coffee shop. Everything in his life fit into quiet routines, like the way he always folded the kitchen towel after washing his hands. A small act, but enough to show that Ethan needed order. Lena entered his life like a note out of rhythm, but not in a bad way. They first met at a photography workshop hosted by a mutual friend. She stood at the back of the room, holding a film camera, her copper-brown hair tied loosely, an old denim jacket draped over her shoulders. Ethan noticed her before he even realized he was looking. She didn't smile much, but when she did, it was like light coming through a storm. They started talking about light angles, Kodak film stock, and somehow wandered into strange topics like the loneliness of black and white photos. Ethan wasn't used to people who talked like that, especially not women like Lena. And yet, she texted first the next day, and he replied as if he'd been waiting. Their early dates were simple. Indie cafes, art exhibits, quiet nights sharing a weird Spotify playlist. Lena didn't like talking about her past, and Ethan, still licking the wounds of a breakup 2 years ago, didn't want to dig either. They were like two people running from memory, finding each other in a temporary silence where nothing had to be explained. Ethan loved her cautiously. He never touched the gray notebook she always carried. He didn't ask why she sometimes turned her phone off at night, or why someone named AM would call at 3 a.m. and she'd silence the ringtone. Lena had her shadows, but Ethan thought, doesn't everyone? He chose to trust, because he wanted this relationship to be something different, something safe, something worth holding on to. But the closer he got to Lena, the more he felt distant from himself. Some nights they lay next to each other, shoulder to shoulder, and yet the space between them felt like an ocean. She wasn't pulling away, but she also wasn't stepping in. Once he watched her sleep. Streetlight glowed through the blinds. She had her back to him, her shoulders slightly hunched like she was fighting something in a dream. Ethan didn't know what it was, but he knew he wasn't in it. One Friday night, while Ethan was rinsing coffee mugs in the kitchen, he heard her talking on the phone in the bedroom. The door was closed. Her voice was low, just a few phrases, barely audible, but enough to send a sharp chill down his spine. When she came out, their eyes met. Ethan said nothing. Lena said nothing. She just grabbed her jacket and said, "I'll be out for a bit." The door clicked shut. Ethan stood there, hands wet, a mug in his grasp. Everything in the apartment looked the same, but something had cracked. He wondered, what signs did I miss? Had this relationship been a one-sided contract from the beginning? Lena returned past midnight. No explanation, no apology. Ethan didn't ask. But from that moment, something shifted, not between them, but inside him. The next morning, Ethan made coffee as usual, but for the first time, he didn't pour a second cup. A week after that night, when Lena had gone out without explanation, Ethan received a message. No name, no context, just a photo. It loaded slowly, weak Wi-Fi at his usual coffee shop. The image sharpened gradually. Lena, sitting at the far end of a dimly lit bar, her hand resting gently on the neck of a man Ethan had never seen. They were smiling. She leaned into his shoulder, like a scene from a romantic film. Only Ethan wasn't in the cast. His first reaction wasn't anger. It was silence, a stillness that pressed against his chest like water filling a sinking room. People around him were laughing, ordering lattes. The barista called out names, but at Ethan, the world had suddenly gone quiet. He looked at the photo again. No timestamp, no caption, but the lighting, the jacket Lena wore, it matched that night. He didn't reply to the message, didn't call Lena. Instead, he left the coffee shop and walked aimlessly down a leaf-covered street. asking himself just one question over and over. Did she ever actually love me? That night, Lena came home late. Ethan was on the sofa, laptop open but untouched. She walked in, took off her coat, set down her bag, and didn't meet his eyes. "Did you eat?" she asked casually, as if everything was normal. Ethan didn't answer right away. He unlocked his phone, opened the photo, and placed it on the table between them. She looked, didn't blink. "Do you have anything to say?" he asked, voice steady, low, almost too calm. Lena was silent. After a moment, she sat down across from him. "That's an old friend," she said. "We caught up. It wasn't anything serious." "Not serious?" Ethan repeated, lips twitching slightly. "It's just, I'm confused," she added. That word, confused, felt like a dull blade dragging across Ethan's ribs. No clarity, no remorse. How do you argue with someone who doesn't even know what they want? "Do you want to end this?" he asked. It was the first time she really looked at him that night. Her eyes shimmered like they might cry, but no tears came. "I don't know," she whispered. Ethan stood, walked over the window. Rain tapped gently against the glass. It ran in thin, glistening trails, just like his thoughts, searching for meaning and finding none. He didn't tell her to leave. She didn't walk out. But that night, they lay back to back in the same bed, both wide awake. The next morning, Ethan left early. No goodbye. But something inside him had changed, and there would be no going back. Ethan woke up at 3 a.m., suddenly and for no clear reason. The apartment was dark, eerily silent. Only the red glow of the digital clock blinked faintly on the nightstand. Beside him, Lena lay still, turned away, the blanket pulled up to her shoulders. Her breathing was steady, but to Ethan, she felt miles away, not in distance, but in presence. He lay there for a while, eyes wide open. His mind kept playing back that photo, her vague response, her avoidance. The way she had said, "I'm confused," echoed like a tired refrain through his head. He sat up slowly, put on his hoodie, grabbed his phone and keys, and slipped out without a sound. The cold air outside hit his face sharply, tinged with misty drizzle. Each drop felt like a tiny reminder that something inside him was unraveling. He didn't know where he was going, only that he couldn't stay in that bed, in that apartment, beside someone who was technically there but emotionally absent. Seattle was a different city at 3 a.m. The streets were empty, storefronts dark, occasional convenience, stores glowing dimly like ghosts. He walked for blocks without direction. When he finally stopped, he realized he was standing in front of the old cafe on Pine Street, the place they had their first date. It was still open, still playing soft jazz, still carrying the same scent of freshly brewed beans and warm pastries. Ethan stepped inside and took the table near the window. The server, a new face, took his order without question. Drip coffee, black. He stared out at the rain. The outside world moved slowly. Inside his head, however, thoughts collided like waves against glass. He had loved Lena with the kind of quiet endurance most people mistake for passivity. But what was love when you're holding on to someone who's slipping away in silence? He used to believe that being good, being patient, being present, that all of it would be enough. Maybe some people come into your life not to stay, but to show you what hurts when you don't walk away. The cafe door chimed. Ethan barely looked up until a tall figure in a gray hoodie stepped in, eyes scanning the room. Their eyes met, and the stranger smiled wide. "Ethan? No way." It took Ethan a moment. Then it hit him, Noah, his best friend from college. They hadn't seen each other in over 3 years. Back then, they were inseparable, the kind of friends who would knock on each other's doors at 3 a.m. just to share a song or a stupid dream. "You live in Seattle again?" Ethan asked as they embraced briefly. "Yeah, moved back 2 months ago. Noah replied, sliding into the seat across from him. "Man, I thought I'd never see you again." "You picked a hell of a time," Ethan said with a dry laugh. Noah gave him a long, quiet look. "You okay?" Ethan didn't answer right away. Noah didn't push. Instead, he waved for a coffee and waited. After a long pause, Ethan started to talk, not with full details, just pieces, enough to let the weight fall off his chest. He told Noah about Lena, about the distance, about the photo, about that line, "I don't know." Noah listened without interrupting, sipping slowly. He didn't offer pity, just presence. When Ethan finally stopped, Noah leaned back. "I remember once, back in college, you told me love was a decision, not just a feeling. You chose her. But if she didn't choose you back, that's not love anymore. That's something else." The truth landed softly but deeply. Ethan had known it all along, but hearing it aloud made it real. Maybe, Noah added, you loved the version of her you hoped she was, not the one she actually showed you. Ethan lowered his gaze. That hurt, because it was true. And maybe, Noah continued, you need to forgive yourself, not for loving her, but for believing that love alone would be enough. Ethan swallowed. There were no tears, but something inside him cracked open, not in pain, but in clarity. Outside, the sky began to lighten. The rain had stopped. The street reflected the early morning glow of passing cars. They both stood up. At the door, Noah clapped a hand on Ethan's shoulder. When you're ready, he said, don't look for someone to fill the emptiness. Find someone who makes you forget there was ever emptiness to begin with. Ethan nodded, a small, quiet nod. But for the first time in many nights, he didn't feel like the one waiting anymore. He was walking. 2 days after meeting with Noah, Ethan decided to clean the apartment. Not just tidy up, a full overhaul. He pulled apart shelves, wiped down dusty windowsills, straightened every crooked frame, every picture that had sat tilted for too long. Somewhere inside him, something wanted to be reset, if not his heart, then at least the chaos around him. While rearranging the closet, his hand brushed against a small wooden box tucked in the top corner. The one Lena always called not very important. Inside, aside from a few old photos and ticket stubs, was a gray leather notebook, the one she always carried but never let him read. He hesitated. Opening it would cross a line between respect and necessity. But Ethan wasn't in a relationship that required him to maintain polite boundaries anymore. He needed clarity, not courtesy. The first few pages were harmless. Work notes, meeting dates, random quotes. But deeper in, the content shifted. Personal, journal-like. On a page marked by a thin press photo, he stopped. I hate pretending. Hate having a smile when my mind is somewhere else. Ethan is good, gentle, and has never hurt me. But I don't feel anything anymore. Maybe I'm wrong for staying. Maybe I'm a coward for not saying it out loud. But how do you hurt someone who doesn't deserve to be hurt? Ethan sat still. The words weren't about betrayal of the body, but of the heart. A quiet kind of leaving that happens long before anyone walks out the door. He closed the notebook. He didn't feel angry or even sad, just empty. That afternoon, he went out for a walk with his old film camera, something he hadn't touched since Lena came into his life. He ended up near Lake Union, in a small park where autumn leaves drifted down like time itself slowing. He snapped a few photos, not for art, not for memory, just to see the world through a frame again. Alone, a young woman reading on a bench, her black hair catching the light, a child chasing a red balloon, an old man playing violin under the trees. These tiny, unremarkable moments pulsed with life, as if the world continued regardless of who stayed or left. When he returned, he began to write, not to post, not to share, just to pour things out. Feelings, questions, silences. The things they never said during their year together. That evening, he placed Lena's notebook on the table. When she returned, her eyes landed on it instantly. "You read it?" she asked, not angry, just surprised. "I did," Ethan said. "For the first time, I think I understand you." She didn't deny it, didn't explain. Ethan looked at her, then said quietly, "It's not your fault you stopped loving me, but it is your fault for letting me believe you still did." Lena's lips pressed into a thin line. Her eyes shimmered, not with guilt, but with the ache of being seen too clearly. "I'll move out by the weekend," Ethan added. "The lease is under your name. I don't want to stay somewhere I no longer belong." She nodded. No protest, no plea. Ethan stood, walked to the mirror by the door. His reflection stared back, pale, tired, but different. In his eyes was no longer the helpless man of a few nights ago. There was something steadier. "Awake. You said you hated pretending." He turned and said, "From now on, you don't have to pretend with me." And then he opened the door and left, not escaping, but returning to himself. Ethan moved out of the apartment on a Sunday morning, the first sunny day in Seattle after a long week of rain. He rented a small studio near Green Lake. It had plenty of light, a desk by the window, and, most importantly, no memories attached to Lena. Living alone didn't scare him anymore. He cooked for himself, walked more, and started each day with the same ritual. A cup of coffee and one question in his notebook. "How do I feel today?" Some days he wrote lighter. Other days, just a question mark. But he wrote, and that in itself meant he was alive. One afternoon, while reading at a cafe near his new place, Ethan unexpectedly ran into Jamie, a former project partner of Lena's. They'd met a few times at parties, just enough for polite nods and name recognition. Jamie spotted him first. She walked over with a cautious smile. "So, I heard you two aren't together anymore." Ethan nodded, calm. "Yeah, it's been a few weeks." She sat down. For a moment, she just stirred her coffee, then said, "Do you know why Lena started pulling away?" Ethan frowned. "She told me she didn't feel anything anymore." Jamie gave a soft, bittersweet laugh, not mocking, but the kind that comes from holding in a truth too long. "Lena isn't great at talking, but I think you should know. About 3 months before things started falling apart, her mom was diagnosed with early-stage Alzheimer's. She didn't tell anyone, not even her best friend." Ethan froze. "I only knew because I once went with her to the hospital. No one else did. Lena's the kind of person who carries everything alone until it gets too heavy." The world around them kept moving. People ordering coffee, sunlight streaming through the window. But Ethan's mind went completely still. Jamie continued gently, "I'm not saying this so you'll go back or forgive her. I just think there are things we don't see when we're hurting, but later from a different place. Maybe we understand them differently." They said goodbye without needing more words. Ethan walked home slowly, head spinning. It wasn't about still loving Lena. It was about facing something larger. Sometimes people leave not because they want to, but because they don't know how to stay. That night, Ethan pulled out his notebook and wrote more than usual. He didn't blame her. He didn't blame himself. He simply wrote what he now believed to be true. Sometimes love doesn't end because it wasn't enough, but because the world around him made survival too hard. A few days later, he received an email from an unfamiliar address. The subject line, "Thank you for not trying to hold me." It was short. Lena said she was moving to Oregon, where her mother used to live. She didn't ask for forgiveness, didn't want to fix anything. She just said that now she had found the strength to speak the truth she couldn't say before, and that if they ever met again, she hoped they could look each other in the eye without looking away. Ethan read it, then closed it. He didn't reply. Instead, he put on his jacket and went for a walk. For the first time, he strolled along the lakeside without his camera. He didn't need to capture the moment. He was finally living in it. March in Seattle was colder than Ethan expected. Spring arrived late. The lake remained still, a flat mirror reflecting the pale sky above. Ethan sat on the wooden bench near the water, holding a paper cup of coffee, his gaze soft and distant. But there was no doubt in his eyes anymore, no tightness in his chest. He came here every Sunday now, not to wait for anything, but to remind himself that he was still here, still whole, still healing. Today marked exactly 1 year since he and Lena had met, not an anniversary, just a milestone, a quiet circle that had finally closed. He opened his notebook and wrote, "It's cold today, but I don't feel cold inside. I've forgiven her, and I've forgiven myself." A voice came from behind. "Is this seat taken?" Ethan looked up. A young woman stood there, camera in hand, her brown hair tied loosely, a long tan coat wrapped around her. Her expression was open, curious, not invasive, as if she had just stepped out of a different story, one that had nothing to do with his past. "No, go ahead," he replied. She sat, carefully adjusting her camera. "You a photographer?" Ethan smiled. "Used to be. Now I just look." She turned slightly toward him, eyebrow raised. "Then you're still shooting. You're just not keeping anything." He paused, caught off guard by the insight, then smiled again. It had been a long time since someone said something that reached that deep, that gently. They talked casually about the weather, the lighting this time of year, how the coffee at the corner shop had changed since new management. Nothing profound, but it wasn't shallow either. Just two strangers sitting beside each other in a moment that didn't need anything more. As she stood to leave, she pulled out a Polaroid, a photo freshly printed from her camera. "You want this?" It was a candid shot of Ethan, sitting quietly by the lake, sunlight brushing his face, a small, almost hesitant smile on his lips. He took it. "Thanks. What's your name?" "Claire," she said. "Yours?" "Ethan." "Well, Ethan, I hope we run into each other again." "I hope so too." She walked away, and Ethan remained on the bench, the photo still in his hand. A moment he hadn't planned to keep, but now couldn't let go of. He closed his notebook and stood up. Spring was coming, not just outside, but within him. Someone who doesn't stay doesn't mean their love wasn't real. Ethan's story isn't about a broken romance. It's about healing. He began with hope, walked through loss, accepted an unspoken truth, and let go. Not because the love was gone, but because he finally learned to love himself more. Lena wasn't a traitor. She was a woman quietly drowning in her own pain, not knowing how to share it. She didn't leave to hurt anyone. She simply couldn't stay. And Ethan, through his final understanding, realized that he didn't need a reunion to feel whole. Just a peaceful afternoon, an unexpected glance, and a genuine smile were enough to begin again. Some relationships don't end because they're wrong. They end because they've already taught us how to love better next time. Thank you for walking this emotional journey with Ethan. Thank you for your patience, for reading every chapter, every line, and every quiet ache in the heart of a man learning to let go and move forward. If you've ever loved someone until hurt, had to leave without closure, or stood back up from a place you thought you couldn't, then this story isn't just Ethan's. It's yours, a piece of your past or a light for your future. Thank you for being here. We'll meet again in another story, where someone, maybe you, will learn to love again.